Welcome to Agape Social Justice, where we focus on love, truth, and justice. You may recognize me as Stephanie's husband because oftentimes that's how I introduce myself when we go so many places because she is just so popular. But I have the rare opportunity to interview my wife. You say, interview your wife? You don't know her by now? Trust me, I know her. But we want to bring out some things that you probably don't know about her. So, Stephanie, as my beloved, and we've been together 24, 25 years, but we are experiencing right now our 23rd year of marriage. And I can tell you from the very beginning when we got together that I knew that there was something very different about you. And not just the love that she expresses to us. And when I say us, because we do have two girls, 20 and 17, soon to be 21 with our oldest, but the love that she just has for mankind as a whole. So when I think about the love that you display to us as a family and that our community experiences, where did it come from? I mean, obviously, you're going to say Christ because, we're a Christ-centered family. Jesus is first. But when did you first experience it or want to experience it and share it with other people in terms of that agape love that you have for mankind as a whole?
I actually think it started even earlier than I originally thought. As you know, our audience may not be aware that I grew up in a very dysfunctional family. There's really no other way to put it. My father's like one of 11, mother one of 11. There's some of their siblings who are deceased. But growing up in larger families, sometimes there's just a lot of stuff that happens where people don't get along. Growing up in Detroit, one of my earliest memories with family that was pretty traumatic was my uncle being murdered. And I still can envision Uncle Wink, and I can still remember us being like in that family room and seeing the family just devastated and crying and going through that and having other traumatic experiences growing up in the neighborhood. We did eventually move to Southfield, and one of my best friends was murdered while I was in high school. And then, as you know, the year we were getting married in 2000, prior to us getting married, my brother was murdered.
Yes.
And I think throughout my life, when I look back on the dynamic within the family, how I saw family members treat one another, how I felt treated by certain family members, and then just experiencing all this trauma that I had. It's like, what else can you hold on to other than love? You know what I mean? And I had this strong desire and craving to want love. And at some point during the election, I believe this last election cycle, I do sometimes what's called these confessions on Facebook, and there was a lot of controversy going back and forth over abortion, and how people feel about it, and I decided to share a portion of my story, which was that the first time I was ever pregnant was at age 16. And I was pregnant more than once. And one of my experiences was an abortion. And as I began to share more about my past and my story and who I am, what I realized is that when I'm willing to be vulnerable, that's actually an expression of love for people. You know what I mean? Like, I began to see people respond differently, like the weight off their shoulders was removed and they could just be themselves and just be authentic. And I began to realize, I think, as you know, years ago, we met at church, and at that church where we met was when, at least for I think for both of us, we began to feel more of a calling to ministry. And I began to recognize that part of what ministry is not just loving God, but it is loving your neighbor. The two greatest commandments that we have in biblical texts, right, is to love God and love your neighbor. Well, my motto has kind of been, be real with God, be real with yourself, and be real with others. And because of my life experiences, because of my faith in Jesus, that's kind of where my love for humanity really comes from.
Well, I've seen great growth in you as well when you've also embraced, from a biblical standpoint, love yourself as you love your neighbor. And not to say that early on that you didn't have a love for yourself, but as I've seen and as you have grown in terms of caring more about yourself, self-care, loving yourself, that has translated into loving us more as a family, and obviously loving the community. And that love can sometimes come off and appear as abrasive, because quite frankly, you can be kind of hard. As you say, keep it real. Keep it real kind of a girl. And being a keep it real kind of a girl with that type of courage that you have, it really just brings people to a point of either accepting the love that you want to put forth, or either they want to push back. So, talk about that in terms of, well, I guess we can get to that a little later because we've got a little time, but, your political journey, because, as I've seen it go over the last 2.5 years, and you entered into that space, with the intent to share that agape love across, across the board as it relates to the Democratic Party, and more importantly, the community. You've been met with different oppositions and trials and tribulations, and if you've responded in a loving manner, but at the same time, you get your respect.
Well, let's start first with the first question. I think is kind of where you've seen my journey through kind of loving myself more, and then that spilling over into family and the community. So I think for me, I was talking to someone who is a behavioral therapist who we both know. He's now deceased. And one of the things that he said to me is that in so many words, he basically said, you're a people pleaser, meaning I don't fake to please people, but I was allowing people to walk over me to a certain extent, right? So in order, whether it was to keep the peace or whether I thought that this is how you can be politically correct. Some people see it as playing chess and not checkers. You hear people use that language. And so they allow things to happen that really should never happen to them or anyone else, but they feel that it's being strategic. And that in the end, they'll kind of get what they want, right? I was in those spaces, whether it was family, whether it was friends, whether it was community work or political work. I realized that was all kind of the same thing, and that I was putting other people first, period, right? Mothers can relate to this, right? Because oftentimes what we do is our children come first and we're last,
Yes.
And so I went through that journey, even as a spouse, putting your spouse first and you coming last. And so I think you hit a point where, when you're tired, like I'm tired of you're sick and tired and you're weary, Margaret actually gave me that term recently, the correct emotion is more of weariness. And I think when you hit that point, for me, it was either turning in a direction that would be unhealthy, or either trying to figure out how to process what I was going through and love myself more. When I was a child, I actually had, a period of time where I was suicidal because I felt like I wasn't getting the love, that I needed. And I knew there was something more out there, but I think it took for me to, really accept Christ. And as my faith grew, even then still struggling with this love for self, right? There's this self-condemnation. There's the condemnation that other people put on you, and then really trying to just figure that out. So long story short, over going through the journey of reading scripture, of really just saying affirmations to myself, surrounding myself around people who were loving on me and loving me through, my journey kind of really helped me a lot. And I ultimately had a conversation with one of my good friends, as you know, Renee Samuels. She is the co-founder of Samwell Solutions, who I highly recommend people check out Samwell Solutions. But one of the things that I feel like I learned from her was to establish boundaries. And I think we don't do that enough, right? And so once I began to establish boundaries, I began to put non-negotiables in place. And so for me, that was and in order to do that, I had to be harder. I had to have a harder exterior, or else I would just kind of revert back to, managing things the way that I was. So now I've kind of learned how to like fine tune more and more, but I have these boundaries in place. There's really just nothing more than self-care and, loving and respecting yourself.
And that love and respect is tempered with that of integrity. Because everything that you move into and everything that you do, you bring forth a sense of integrity. Like the different jobs that you've had throughout the years. And talk about the different employment situations that you've been in, that you've had to make decisions based upon integrity. And obviously, I've had to live through them. As it relates to, whatever financial situations that may have placed our family in. But, talk about, how you utilize integrity on jobs and some that you had to separate and walk away from.
Yeah, so this is the thing. I've actually said this to people and they don't believe me. Okay, they just, I know my friend Jessica, that was his first grade. Like she and I talk about this because we're on the same page as it relates to integrity. But I tell people that's big for me. I don't know why. I don't know where it came from. I felt that way years ago, but I think having this conviction to always be true and authentic and be honest as best as you can. And I've been in a situation on jobs where they have outright told me to lie to customers. I mean, just outright lie. There's no other way to put it. Okay. And I had an opportunity to climb the corporate ladder in a couple of different situations, and I chose not to do so because if that meant that I wasn't going to be able to look myself in the mirror, I wasn't going to be able to sleep well at night. It wasn't worth it. And then it got to the point where you have, people where the expectation on the job is that you're willing to lie. And I just wasn't willing to do it. And I believe that God will make a way out of no way. And will not cause me to continue to be in situations like that because it eats at me very differently than people who don't see integrity in that manner. And I do think that there are times when I get assertive and aggressive, particularly in the community, because when we lie to people, it creates more distrust, right? We've seen, it has played out with my education advocacy work and people who come to us in person, in the community, grocery store, wherever we are, phone calls I get, text messages, emails, and that lack of integrity causes so much harm, so much pain in people's lives. And so I have no tolerance for it whatsoever.
And on the job, we call it playing the game. And you've never played the game well. Actually, you're really unemployable.
I am. I need to work for myself.
Yeah. And one of the big things when we talk about, integrity and people living up and beyond the standard of everyone else is that we find ourselves not being paid what we are worth. Talk about that, because that's the conversation that we often have is I'm not paid what I'm worth. Talk about that and how you might what are some things that you might be able to do to receive the compensation, not necessarily from a 9-to-5 or a job, but receive the compensation that you deserve for the love that you put forth, the integrity that you embody, and the work that you put in, because you work. Let me tell you, people. Let me tell you. When she took on this quest 2.5 years ago, as it relates to getting involved, in the political system,
social justice in
general, it's been an ongoing quest, and that's what it's been. In terms of constantly on the phone, constantly interceding, constantly, fielding phone calls from individuals that need help. So talk about that in terms of what might you be able to do moving forward to receive the compensation that you honestly deserve.
So I think it's twofold. I've talked to a number of friends about this, and I won't go into the whole business aspect of marketing and all that, which oftentimes we don't have the skills that we need to market our services, market ourselves in the way that we should, as other people do.
Yes.
I also think that part of learning how to love yourself is to understand that you are worthy of pay, that as a believer, you are worthy to be paid well, that everything does not have to be through the lens of the stereotypical nonprofit ministry, don't get paid, I just give you what you receive. And I think that has honestly been, part of it and has been a struggle. And so getting to the place where I am now of, I am worthy of not only being paid, but being paid what I'm worth. And so if you're willing to pay this individual hundreds of dollars an hour, then I command and demand the same thing as well, if that is comparable to what that job is supposed to pay, whether it's sales, whether it is advocacy, whether it is some of the consultation that I do, whatever it is. I've just gotten to a point where there's certain non-negotiables. And I've also had people in my life who said, Steph, if they want you, then they need to tell you what their budget is, and the dollar amount that's attached is how they ascribe their worth, their value system, right? Dollars is your value system. So if that organization is not putting money toward this category of work that needs to happen for the community, that's a value statement, is what I was told, right? And likewise, if you're providing services to the community or to this establishment, they're making a value statement or a judgment. And so I'm learning more in terms of how to walk into that, as I venture into different things.
Well, not to pick on any particular organization or entity, but do you find that in some organizations that are run by different cultures, that there's a reluctancy to pay, particularly people of color or yourself or of gender,
Yes.
The money that they're worth, or the money that they would pay other
Yes.
individuals within their own culture?
And as you know, this isn't even just my opinion. This is documented, right? This is we have data that we can reference in terms of the inequities in pay, right, in promotion, and in other things that exist in the workplace. But I also find in doing work that you do for the community, whether it be nonprofit or, whether it be organizations that focus on doing goodwill in the community, oftentimes there's either they say there's no pay or you don't get paid well. And that's a struggle, right? And I think that people have this perception that because I'm Black, I should always want to kind of do this work. Right. Because we're out here, some people see it as like a hustle or it's just your ministry, but there's trauma attached to this. There's sweat equity we're putting into what we do. And so I think what we're beginning to say is, whether it is political and you want us to canvas for you, right? Whether we're phone banking, door knocking, standing at a poll or doing whatever, there are times when we should volunteer and do our civic engagement. And there are other times where you deserve to be paid, especially if you're providing consultation.
I think in the midst of individuals and their love for a particular effort or their calling, that people get confused, because the old saying is that you'll never work a day if you love what you're doing. But that doesn't mean that I shouldn't get paid,
right,
because I love what I'm doing. And because you come to the stage with so much passion and obviously love, it's like, well, she would do this anyway. I might do this anyway, but because of my integrity and because of integrity that you should be displaying as well, you need to pay me.
Yeah.
You need to pay me.
No, I agree. And I'm to the point now with even looking at internships, right? So there are opportunities that I've even given some young people the opportunity years ago to shadow me and go to a meeting with me and things like that. And there are opportunities that have been afforded to them to do that, right? There's some unpaid internships that are very helpful. They get to put it on their resume. But then there are other people who take on responsibilities where they're working. I mean, they're humping, okay?
Yes.
And I've been in these situations, and it should appear to be obvious to people. But what I tell people is, listen, if you feel any sort of conviction, any discernment, any spiritual conviction that you have, and you feel like you're not being treated properly, you get this feeling in your gut, don't ignore that. I've ignored it for far too long. And so I think that you can begin to place yourself first. Right? There's nothing wrong with taking care of yourself, taking care of your family, as well as taking care of the community. You don't need to get the short end of the stick all the time. And I think that was a process that I had to go through, right? In terms of understanding that. So now I have these non-negotiables moving forward with people, to say that there's certain things that I'll do at no cost, because I love my community, because it's this ministry, because of whatever. But then there are times where I need to find out, who do I send my invoice to? And I learned that from my friend Tia Marie as well.
I know that's right. Yeah. Thank God for Tia Marie. As you've had different experiences on the job, for different employers and whatnot, and now tell us a little bit about what you're doing and the direction that you're moving in, and how excited you're about, these different opportunities that you're involved in right now, and what 2024 holds for you in terms of the things that you're really excited about that people are going to pay.
So I'm not going to go too deep into some of the things, because I'm actually going to talk about some of the political stuff when I do a separate episode. Sure. talking about politics. But I'm really excited about being in any space that really allows me to get people out of their comfort zone, right? To have these uncomfortable conversations. And so I've talked about maybe venturing into being kind of like a consultant, if you will, but more as a healing coach, like someone who helps people navigate. And those are words that people have given me in terms of saying, this is how I see you, this is what you do. And I have people who've approached me and said, I want to learn how to not only navigate the educational system stuff, because I know, like you for over a decade, I provided free services to people for education advocacy, but helping people navigate political disagreements, helping people navigate establishing relationships with someone who has a different political belief than they have, maybe even religion. It has created conflict in people's homes, not just in the workplace, not just in a neighborhood. And so I am working on, actually, if I'm being honest here, just keeping it real, that space that says coming soon on the website is where that was supposed to go, right? Because I want to get to the point where my schedule is so busy that I haven't been able to reach out to everybody and follow through, but I want to make time where I am actually being available to people, and they can contract me and we can help them navigate those uncharted waters oftentimes for people, because they just don't know how to even start the conversation and need a mediator to help them to do so. So that's one thing I'm looking forward to. And then also just continuing facilitation and talking about racial healing, racial justice, and racial solidarity, and what that looks like. What does that look like for us as people of color to begin to lean in to other people and their feelings and what they're experiencing, as well as helping other people to learn about our experiences and how they can be not only allies, but co-conspirators, or whatever word people want to use, that gets them to a place where it's not just rah-rah, or putting a hashtag on their social media, but actually jumping into using their influence and their privilege and their power to make change in our communities.
Well, with the little time that we have left, talk about the organization that you're involved in now on a part-time basis, that very well may flourish into something full-time in 2024.
So
that you've really been excited about. I mean, of all the things that you've been involved in, other than your family, you've been ultra excited about this. So talk about that.
So I'll hold off on saying the name right now. Okay. I'll bring that forth maybe in a future episode as we venture into that work. But one of the things that I do right now, and Becky Lee was actually on the show. I don't know if we talked about some of the work that we're doing with Braver Angels, Undivided, but we have like this hub team And this hub team is in the community right now where we are having community conversations. We're basically asking people questions about what do you see working well in the community? What would you like to see change? What do you see happening with people who are impacted by homelessness? And so right now we are collecting that data, and then we're going to figure out what a justice campaign would look like for that. And then there's a possibility that in 2024, I will be able to expand that, and I'll just put one little thing out there that it won't just be working with activists, but I'll have an opportunity to work with faith-based organizations. So stay tuned for that. I'm pretty excited, but I do believe I was born for this. I believe that my calling is to really just allow myself to be fully exposed. Like, people think like they got those gotcha moments with me, and they don't understand that I am 1000% like transparent and vulnerable at all times, probably more than you want me to be, that our children want me to be, but that's just, you know, who God has called me to be. And like I've said before, I've realized that when I'm that way, healing takes place, not only for myself, but for the people that I'm talking to or the people whom I'm serving.
Certainly. You know, and as we begin to wrap this up, you know, I certainly want to say that as I've talked about politicians and I've talked about statespeople, you know, that's who you are. And I know that as you certainly wait to hear, or you don't make a move without the move of God. Well, sometimes you do. But ideally waiting on the move of God. I know that there's a calling on your life as it relates to politicians. And just for a point of reference, you know, I've always said that, you know, you remind me of an African-American Nancy Pelosi. And again, I'm not trying to get political or anything like that. But what I mean is a woman that can go in there, command respect, and more importantly, share her heart and love with a nation, with an organization to create change. Well, whether or not she's done that, you know, that's debatable. But I mean, as I relate and I see that in you, I know that that's the call that you have upon yourself. And as you charter and you navigate these political waters and the difficulties and the trials and tribulations that you experience, those individuals that you may have an ought with or do not respect exactly what you stand for at this particular time, trust me, they will bow down in reverence because of the service that you're going to render to the people of God and to this nation, community, or wherever it may start and wherever it may end up. So I see big, great things that the Lord has planned for you, and I'm not trying to prophesy or anything like that. And, you know, you don't listen to me as much as you ought to anyway, but you're going to have to hear from God when he says it's time for you to run.
I don't know about that one. I know you've been saying that for a while. I don't particularly feel that at this point, but certainly if there's at any time, obviously, if you know, I'll be broken down crying to you anyway. Like, okay, this is what the Lord said.
Well, as we're nearing the end right now, why don't you close us out? I've given my summary in terms of, you know, this fabulous woman that I have the privilege to call my wife, and I thank my God daily. Trust me, I do, for her. So why don't you use these next few seconds to go ahead and close us out?
Well, I just want to, thank Walter for coming in and joining me again. One of the things that you're going to see on season 2 is Walter jumping in, maybe us tag teaming, maybe him hosting or I'm hosting.
And because of her schedule, me doing more of this.
Which is probably why he's trying to push me into doing something full time. But I just want to thank him for coming on. I want to thank you all for just your patience with me. And sometimes I can't always respond to everyone. But I wanted to be able to come forward, talk about some of the things that I'm working on. I'll talk more about those things that I'm doing in the future. But thank you so much. We appreciate you. We love you. God bless you.